Growing up, my dad would sometimes send me down into his toolbox to fetch a certain tool. Much to his chagrin, I'd usually end up bringing him the wrong tool about 9 times out of 10. To put it mildly, it wasn't all that apparent to the young me what the difference was between a socket wrench and a normal wrench. Although as a grown-up, I've gotten much better at categorizing tools, I must admit that today's lesson on the different stone tools of the Paleolithic age can be a tricky one. For this reason, we're going to work to cover the very basics of this topic, hitting upon the most agreed upon theories of our very ancient past. For the starters, the Paleolithic age is often simply referred to as the Old Stone Age, spanning from the beginning of man's existence until about the year 10,000 BC. Adding to this definition, the Paleolithic age holds the first evidence of humans making and using tools. However, since the Paleolithic age spans such a vast amount of time, this tool-making process is usually broken down into 4 main categories, usually referred to as industries. They are the Ottoman industry, the Acheulean industry, the Clactonian industry, and the Mousterian industry. With it being the oldest of the 4, we'll start with the Alduin industry. The Alduin industry consists of very rudimentary tools such as stones used to pound, scrape, or chop things. Interestingly, archaeologists don't think these tools were used in the hunting of game. Instead, they were most likely used to scrape meat from animal carcasses or to pound vegetation into edible forms. Many of the most common Alduin tools have been coined as pebble tools, the earliest known tools which were made of very small stones. With this in mind, and to help me keep things straight, I like to remember the Alduin industry as simply the oldest one. With this, we move on to the Acheulean industry. Believed to have sort of followed the Alduin industry, the Acheulean industry consisted of tools that were chipped down to create a thin tool symmetrically carved on both sides. The tools of this industry were also much larger than the tools of the older Alduin industry. Excellent examples of this are the many axe-shaped tools found at St. Acheulean, France, the very site this industry is named after. As you can see from this image, these tools have been shaped and chiseled to be symmetrical and pointed. Making this one much easier for us amateurs to remember, many archaeologists refer to the Acheulean industry as the axe industry. Next, we have the Clactonian industry. But before we get into this description, there's one thing we need to sort of say. First, there is not agreement among anthropologists as to which industry came first, the Acheulean or the Clactonian. Also, since the tools from these 2 industries are so similar, some anthropologists actually just lump them together. Keeping this in mind, let's get on to the Clactonian industry, named after the area known as Clacton-on-the-Sea of England. Being very similar to the Acheulean industry, the Clactonian industry consisted of tools that were notched and grooved, leading archaeologists to believe that they were attached to sticks or bones. Trying to keep things straight, I use this and think that Clactonian tools were clasped to wood or bones. Also differing from the Acheulean industry, most Clactonian tools were not symmetrical. In other words, they weren't carved or chiseled to have both sides look the same. However, the biggest difference between the Acheulean and the Clactonian industry is that the Clactonian industry seems to have lacked the use of any type of axe, the hallmark tool of the Acheulean industry. This brings us to our last stone industry, the Mousterian industry. Named after Le Mousterier, a geographical formation in France, many assert this industry is the youngest of all the Paleolithic industries. Although characterized by more complex tools, things like well-chiseled hand axes and arrowheads, most archaeologists will freely admit that the Mousterian industry looks very different depending on which area of the prehistoric world you choose to study. However, most will agree that the Mousterian industry included the use of flake tools, small handheld tools created by flaking off small pieces of rock, usually flint. These flake tools were then further improved upon by chiseling them down into points. Strapping these points to a long or short piece of wood, Paleolithic man had himself a very dangerous weapon capable of piercing the hides of even an elephant. Adding to this, the Mousterian industry had many other tools in its toolbox. For this reason, I sort of remember it this way. The Mousterian industry had many tools. Another of these such tools were known as bolas, balls tied together and used as throwing weapons. Like I said, the Mousterian industry had several different tools. The Paleolithic Age, or the Old Stone Age, spanning from the beginning of man's existence until about the year 10,000 BC, is considered to be made up of 4 different stone industries: the Oldowan industry, the Acheulean industry, the Clactonian industry, and the Mousterian industry. The Oldowan industry consisted of very rudimentary tools such as stones used to pound, scrape, or chop things. Many of the most common Oldowan tools have been coined as pebble tools, the earliest known tools which were made of very small stones. Next, there is the Acheulean industry, consisting of tools that were chipped down to create a thin tool symmetrically carved on both sides. One of the most cited of the Acheulean tools are the axe-shaped tools found in St. Achille, France. For this reason, it has also been referred to as the axe industry. Very similar to the Acheulean industry, the Clactonian industry consisted of tools that were notched and grooved, believed to have then been attached to sticks or bones. Unlike the Acheulean industry, there is no evidence of axes existing in the Clactonian industry. Last is the Mousterian industry, the youngest of all the Paleolithic industries. Consisting of many different tools, the Mousterian industry is well known for its flake tools, small handheld tools created by flaking off small pieces of rock, usually flint.